This is our 5th town hall of the year, and we have a few updates that we want to run through that we've been tackling over the past month. So for those who are new to this space, this is our monthly retrospective where we review the work we've been toiling on and the future roadmaps that we have to embark on over the next month until we have our next call. So there's been a lot that's happening over the past few weeks. I'd like to give a quick recap, though, before we dig into this, just about the Notorious project itself, again, for any new viewers here. So we started with 10,000 Notorious Frog NFTs back in September of 2021. We sold those out with a mission that we wanted to develop a metaverse. We wanted to develop a space that would be a home for the IP that we all know and love so much. So with that, we successfully sold out the collection, and we brought on board some exceptional talent from all walks of the entertainment and the technology space. 7 awesome Frogland founders who you all most likely know already. And we worked with some incredible game development talent because we do believe in our heart of hearts that the future of this space is very much going to be revolved around gaming. And we saw the existing spaces that existed were somewhat lacking when it came to the Web3 space. So we wanted to make Web3 fun. We wanted to start gamifying a metaverse with IP that was rich in character and in lore. So having sold out the NFT collection, we brought on board a development studio by the name of Dream Reality Interactive, a tremendous partner of ours who has worked on a lot of very cool IP. A lot of the launch content for Sony PlayStation. They, of course, worked on PlayStation Home and games like Wipeout. So really a tremendous team. And with them, over a 90-day sprint, we managed to deliver a vertical slice of the world that we're starting to build, something that we call the Dragonfly Social Club. So the Dragonfly Social Club was an experiment to see how code development would work in the space, and it was quite an interesting one at that. It taught us a great deal, and since then we've continued with our method of code development and co-creation, where we build in a transparent manner and we start to showcase content to our communities a lot earlier than a traditional game studio would normally do. We've also been cultivating a big theme of lore. In the project, we really want our members who have frogs to dig into the backstories for those frogs. And in fact, if those very early members that minted would remember, to be able to mint, you would have had to fill in a crime sheet, if you will, a Notorious Frog rap sheet. And so with this focus on lore, we feel this is a big part with AI evolving to the point it's now at. It gives us an interesting edge, given our technical know-how, the entertainment space, and how we can work with the community to develop some really cool content. So that being said, we've been building some cool stuff in a transparent manner. Since the release of the Dragonfly Social Club, we've had pilots where we've had social radio dramas that we've had members of our community working with us to create some very cool lore. And with that, we then started building out little mini games. We have a number of mini games in the pipeline. The latest one that we've showcased is Total Recall, which, again, following the theme of code development, has been a game that we've developed initially internally to the point of a proof of concept. We then released it to a token-gated capacity to our members in a staging site, where they are able to then start playing the game and start giving us feedback for improvements, for additions, for changes that we may need to make before pushing it out to a wider audience by way of traditional app stores and online streaming platforms. So this notion of being able to work with a community to develop a product and to polish a product before releasing it to a wider audience, I think it's really, really fascinating, and it's something that's only really been possible since the advent of Web3. So with that, we do have a lot to talk about over the course of the next half an hour or so. I will touch on just one important point that has been keeping a lot of us very busy, which is, of course, fundraising. So we've been making some progress over the past few weeks. We've been talking to a few interesting parties. I will say that we are limited on what we can say on this town hall, mainly due to NDAs. But we're definitely taking a slightly interesting approach here, something that I think bodes well for Frogland and for the space in general. I think due to NDAs, we really can't say too much about it for the next couple of weeks, but we're hoping by the next town hall to be able to give you a run through on what we're thinking. Now, I will add, nothing's been committed to yet, nothing's been agreed upon, but we do have some interesting fingers in the pie, so to speak, that we look forward to getting your feedback from before we actually make any definitive decisions. So with that being said, I'm going to pass over to Lonnie Hops for some community updates.
Thanks, Snoop. So I just have a quick update from Sapo Studios. They're on a short spring break, and so they will be back to live broadcasting on the 20th. However, all of their podcasts and all their previous shows are now live on all streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and they also are now on YouTube. So keep your eyes peeled for new video content coming your way. So I'm going to also run us through a quick creative update. We have, oops, give me 1 second here to pull up my screen. So we have been working on a whole lot of creative content and getting a lot of that framework ready to be shared and helped collaborated on with the community. And so we've kind of teased out some of the Moreau boards and some of the larger scale content that we're working on, both for defining different game mechanics, defining different game loops in different of the mini games or different missions that we're working on, as well as how all of this fits into the larger scale business plan, both with marketing, with gameplay, with world building, with community co-creation, and making sure that it all kind of really fits into the Frogland ethos. And so this is one of these boards, which is, I love these because they all have infinite zoom. So you can pack a whole lot of content into them. And so some of this is things that we'll be able to start sharing out in the next few weeks, and getting the community feedback on, getting people involved in the build out and involved in bringing in the content that the community has created into the world, and kind of starting to really blend everything together in a way that makes sense. One of the comparisons that I've been making within the community that I think is probably bears repeating again is the way that the Marvel universe was set up. If Marvel and their creators had kind of done a little bit closer to what we're doing, where we're doing building things in the open, developing everything with a community, and creating a much larger scale collaborative creative effort, then it would probably feel a little bit similar to, I think, what it does to some of the people who are a little bit less involved on the daily basis with the community, where everything feels very, very big and overwhelming because there are a lot of complexities and there are a lot of characters and a lot of different locations and gameplay mechanics, and it can be a little overwhelming. And I suspect if you went up to Stanley and everyone who created that universe and you asked them what they were building right at the beginning before any of it had been built out and shown in any visual way, it would probably seem very similar, very big and overwhelming and overly complicated, and probably would have scared off a lot of people. But the beauty of what they did at the Marvel Universe is they're not only telling one story over and over, they're telling a story of how an ordinary human or an ordinary person can become a hero, and they, even in the face of adversity, they can still find a path to success, as long as they like stay on the moral high ground and do all the positive things. And they tell that story over and over in all of the different characters and all the different storylines that they go through. And as they tell that story, they weave it all together into a much larger universe. And even though that it still kind of seems a little strange sometimes to know how like Spider-Man is going to interact with Thor, they're all still very cohesive, and it makes sense for that reason.
Right. I mean, so with some of the stuff you threw up there for a moment, lollipops. I mean, so like what I kind of, I guess I think a few of us, interpreted as like when we, been making this together, and people who've had that as like their core focus versus people who've been working on other things, like it feels like a topology, like a narrative and thematic topology over some of these topics in the world. So, for instance, the biomes. What are the themes of each biome, and how do they relate to each other? Because you don't want it to be too exact. You want there to be blurred lines between them, but you also want there to be enough guidance that what would otherwise be an overwhelming sea of information, that there are common threads that go through each of the biomes, that differentiate them, that pull them together, and other aspects of the game as well, affiliations, schools of magic, things like that, that become these different elements we can pull from, while having all these different pieces of lore, all these different bits of narrative to build things out, that there is differentiation, and yet there is, it all feels part of a common core. And so a lot of what you have there is exactly this, is a topology of like where and how these ideas map together, that kind of can start to provide those road signs, those signals, so that people feel the cohesiveness, while in what would otherwise be just a wash in an expansive sea of information. Something that gives directionality, current, stream.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of with that type of like guiding light or narrative structure there, I think it really makes it a lot easier to be able to kind of discover your own characters and discover like what your frogs are going to do and like who you want to be in the world, and be able to kind of build that out and do a little bit better, or not necessarily better, but it makes it easier to kind of go down that journey and have that experience and be able to figure out exactly who you want to be, which I think is
Right.
important.
Like how to define yourself and how to contribute without necessarily needing to be a screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I guess the difference between being given a creative writing project and being given a topic, versus you can do anything, but it's very hard then to like know exactly the scope of what you want to do and how. With the right guidance, it can really help you produce something focused and awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's also worth knowing too, like what Lolly was just showing off there is obviously an internal document, and we're in the process of turning that into more digestible chunks so that people can get a more clear and consistent understanding of what some of those things are. I think one of the first places that we want to target with that is talking about the biomes, right? And so we've been treating the biomes themselves as characters, right? So like each environment has its own personality. It's got strengths and weaknesses and, threats and things that can change the way that characters will react or between each other and with the environment in each of those places, right? And so that's been very fun to put together, I think. And then of course the other thing that's been really interesting about this experience has been taking all the lore that the community has generated and finding that core thread through all of this that makes sense, right? And cobbling it all together. And I think like, when we go through, we have a weekly lore conversation where we just talk about this stuff. And I think what's been interesting is watching, Bugs and Shrimp adapt their like professional Hollywood style writing process to this like more community driven process, and like all of the creativity that's come out of that because of what the community is doing and not necessarily what we're doing, right? So like it's melded together in like a very, very interesting way. I think that's given us this skeleton or the scaffolding where we can start to hang all of these different stories off of. And I think one of the surprises, at least for me, was like, despite there being so many disparate influences for the project, that the voice is really starting to come through between the ideas that we've had and like the ideas that the community has had, and us just riffing off of each other and going back and forth over the past couple of years. So I personally am very, very excited to see pieces of this part of the puzzle start to come out, because I think it's a lot of fun. There's been a lot of thought that's gone into this across the board amongst all of us. And some of the outcomes are just like so damn cool that we definitely would not have been able to come up with them on our own. And so like, to me, that's very indicative that this process is working, right? So
yeah, definitely.
100%.
So I think with that, I'm actually going to hand it back to you two for the technical updates.
All right. So to start off, the reveal. I am working on that and should be done soon. It's just taking a little bit longer, but it is my current top priority to get the reveal both operating again and taking the opportunity at the same time while addressing what's the issue is there. Then in the update, we're actually automating the process more, that it becomes something a little bit easier to do, that can be done more robustly, more frequently, etc. So I'm focusing on improving that process. I would have liked to have it up today. I've just been a little delayed. I've been in the process of moving, and I am no longer in Malta. I am now in Portugal. I arrived this week. It's been a lot of fun, a bit of stress, very exciting. But yeah, I now am in Cascais and kind of settled in here. So I've kind of got all that admin, most of that admin out of the way, and I'm able to kind of focus on getting stuff out the door again. So I guess from us getting the first version of Total Recall out, I also visited some family in South Africa, etc. And so there's been a few things going on, but I'm really looking forward to getting these reveals more automated, and that's something that's coming soon.
I was going to say it's pretty good timing though, because we've got NFC, so the big NFT Lisbon events coming up mid-June, and of course Pizza Party. Pizza DAO has a little shindig that's going on the 22nd of May in Lisbon, so I think that's it's a good timing to be out there. I'm going to be out there myself soon enough.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to both being geolocated with you, Snoop. It's going to be really fun to actually, have one of my colleagues, or two of my colleagues, yourself and Didi, living in the same area as myself, that we can get to do in person more often. Actually, it's also going to make the East Coast that much easier to visit. Flights will be cheaper, closer, less expensive. So it actually makes it much easier for me to visit Lollihops and Froggy Digital, or for them to visit me. So I'm excited from a lifestyle, a community, and a team perspective. So it's generally a very cool, very bullish thing. I'm excited.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, we're excited for you. I'm also very excited to visit. Especially when the weather's crap here in DC.
I am looking forward to that, sir.
Yeah.
All frogs have been decriminalized in Lisbon, I hear.
Yeah. And that was a good plug for May 22nd for the pizza party. Actually, I think left that out of the announcements, but now seems as good a time as any to mention that Pizza DAO is throwing a pizza party again. So there are local events happening on May 22nd, pizza parties all over the world. I'll see if I can dig up the spreadsheet of which cities are actually doing parties, but there's over 20, I think, at this point. There's a lot of them.
I believe it's parties.pizzadao.xyz.
Yeah, Snacks likes the subdomains.
Yeah, exactly. You just buy a domain and point at each subdomain at some different Google Doc.
Yeah.
It's a really good pattern.
Yeah, there's one here in Washington, so if anybody happens to be around, I'll be there. So it should be fun.
Yeah, and actually, and to that, if there are any frogs in Lisbon or Cascais generally, or visiting at some point, reach out. Perhaps we can meet up for a beer. And that's one of the things I'm excited for here, is how there's quite a good Ethereum and crypto community here. Whereas Malta, I think there might have been once upon a time, but I wasn't as social there, and I don't think it was as large. So I'm looking forward to meeting some of you.
Nice. Cool. That's awesome. Moving on to talk a little bit about Total Recall. Again, we've been pushing pretty hard over the past month, trying to get some things fixed. There's dozens of updates in the app, that are coming very, very soon. We were trying to push for it for today, but it just didn't quite make the cut, unfortunately. But the past month of seeing you guys play the game, have fun with it, and then give us all of this feedback that we can incorporate to make it better. And then of course, all of the technical infrastructure and testing, all of that. as well has been absolutely invaluable for us, right? So I think there's probably at least 15 different issues or enhancements that have been added. Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are visible, some of them are not. But we are going to do another round of QA testing with these new changes that we're going to push through on Polygon's Mumbai network before we move over to Arbitrum. There's going to be some adjustments into the gameplay, in particular, rebalancing of some of the rewards. I think that there's a couple new power-ups in there that are pretty fun, some new animations and things like that. So it should change the meta of the game for the better. So it's a good opportunity to go back and play it again when we do that launch. I would like to tell you that it's going to happen this week. I think it will, but it kind of just depends on the last couple of things that we were trying to get done over the weekend. One of the big changes that's going to happen, though, is that rather than minting proto acids directly into your wallet, there's going to be a claim process for that. There's a couple of reasons. One of which is, just to save on gas fees, right? It doesn't, like, if you're playing if you're playing for an hour or so, we don't need to send you 5 transactions or 8 transactions or whatever, right? We can just have one. And then the other reason is we actually think that this is going to be helpful for us getting the game through the various app stores and improving the distribution model, because until you claim, it's not a blockchain asset, right? It's just a standard in-game asset like any other game. So we're hoping that this hybrid approach and defining how this works is going to give us a better chance of getting visibility on some of those platforms. What that does mean is that we have to have. Do you want to riff on that for a second, or?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, right, because it's super exciting and fun and important for us to be able to get this out on as many platforms as possible, both so y'all can play where and how you want to, and also to bring other new people into the community, people who've never heard of the project, maybe haven't even used any blockchain things before, and they just find a fun, cool Froggy game. So yeah, making those changes to pass those tests is exactly. Super important.
The fun comes first, right? So what that does mean, though, is that we need to have a way to be able to claim. And so the way that we've been building a lot of this infrastructure is that it's pretty open. It's actually designed to be accessed by third parties. We haven't opened up all the APIs to third parties yet. If there's anybody in the community who's interested in doing that, reach out to me. We're happy to give people access for testing and that sort of thing to try to build your own apps. But we want this world to be very open so that you can communicate with the parts that are on blockchain. You can communicate with the parts that are running on the cloud, and build your own apps, your own experiences, your own games, and take advantage of this entire ecosystem, right? So with that in mind, we've built so that most of the components that we have, most of the actions or administrative tasks that you would take can be done either from Discord or the website, right? And so for this first iteration, for a lot of these things, we've been building a custom Discord bot over the past couple of months. And so we're going to have a bot that's going to launch into the server that will allow you to interact with the world in a much deeper way than what we have right now with the stores and all that stuff. It's all going to be very integrated. And that's where the claim process will happen. And so you're going to end up getting your proto assets through an NPC in a store in a location in the world, which I think is really cool. And there's a lot of other things that are coming that I don't quite want to spill the beans on yet, but we've been looking at what it means to accrue experience or items or changes to a character versus a player, and what that combination of things is. And there's been a couple of really great conversations over the weekend in Gen Chat. So if you haven't had a chance to catch up, I definitely recommend going back and scrolling back, because we talked a lot about some of those things. But that's what we're building right now, right? Is focusing on the economy, the interaction, and all of those, like that plumbing work that's necessary for us to be able to make all of these different mini games and metaverse games and experiences interoperational, and even be able to work with other communities too, right? So I think that's really cool.
Right. I also, going back to getting in touch with us if you want to start playing with the API. We've had for a while now our backend split into 2 packages that we're making, both the full set of APIs that we're using and an SDK, which is ones we intend to get out there. So like as this is maturing, it's I guess you're saying we're getting to the point of being able to start sharing that with third parties. I guess first trusted third parties, and then opening up more over time. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've always seen this as building, tools and platforms and things that enable your own creativity, right? And so, as we build these things, they're going to start with just access to developer tools. So people who have development experience or professional experience working with software will be able to access those things. And then, of course, like as we move forward and we figure out the right patterns, what people like, we can turn those things into creator tools that are a little bit easier for people to work with, just web front ends and things. So you don't have to know anything about code, right? And that's definitely the goal. Like we want this ecosystem to be easy for people to enjoy and contribute to, but it's going to be a process. Well, it is a process.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think a guiding light for us from the beginning, it's not always been obvious which parts when and exactly how we get there for all of the pieces, but that enabling creativity of the community will always result in more net uplift, more net cool things than what we could possibly imagine and build ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, that both like we touched on that earlier with law creation and how the community, how you'll have helped guide like some really awesome ideas that have been kind of incorporated into that law topology, those thematic maps that we've made. And also, that's the focus with the technical tools as well.
Yes.
Building things to both get what we need to build out there, and but in such a way that it can be shared as soon as possible with the community as builder tools, because making it usable by all of you is going to produce more than we could ever hope to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I mean, I think that's it for updates, right? Yeah. Did we miss anything?
Yeah.
So obviously everybody is talking about AI, and we want to have a little bit of a conversation here about what that means for us. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been very focused on this for quite a long time, but really in the past month or so, the tooling has gotten it's taken a very significant leap to the point where we can build some pretty advanced stuff with it, and we've been experimenting with those things. As I mentioned, there was a conversation that happened, in Gen Chat that I think captures a lot of the spirit of that in general. But I wanted to touch a little bit on like the way that we're thinking about this, the way that it works technologically, to try to give people some context about how we see it, right? And so I think everyone seems to be very concerned that it's going to take everyone's jobs. I saw somewhere in a blog at one point that was like, it's not going to take your job, but the guy who knows how to use it will, right? Which I thought was pretty funny.
Right.
But in working with these language models at a pretty deep level, the realization that I've come to is that this changes the way that communication happens on the internet and the way that machines can translate and parse that, right? And so up until now, if you run a company, you've got a supplier or a vendor and you want to integrate with them, you've got to pay a software engineer to build that directly. And that's going to be custom. It's going to take time. It's brittle. If somebody changes the number from, an integer to a float, puts a decimal place in there or something, or that can break things, right? And so the fuzziness of these models actually allows that type of integration to be done in plain English or whatever the native language happens to be. And so I think what we're going to see here is that more and more logic that drives actual software and tools and things like that is going to be written in English, and that's super, super powerful because for our model that we're using, where we're building tooling and we're building these Lego pieces, basically, right? That they're designed specifically for composability. It's going to make it a lot easier for people to be able to build apps and unique things that don't require a software engineer to be standing in the middle of it.
Right. And I mean, So to me, like that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, there's nothing for a human to do. It means that we get away from the syntax and we get to really just what is the problem, what is the solution. And you don't even have to have a clear idea to start with. You can almost workshop that
Exactly.
with this thing, and it turns it more into both a computer science problem rather than an engineering problem, but actually a very approachable one where you didn't necessarily need to know the computer science answer to start with and can't necessarily name it at the end.
Yeah, exactly. It moves a lot of this up into the social layer, the programming of all this stuff, which I think is really cool, right? And so that, I actually think we're going to end up with, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a shakeout and a change and a transition through this, but I think this is actually going to make humans more necessary for the process, right? Because we're going to be able to focus on creative things, building cool stuff, without having to focus so much on the plumbing work. So I'm very excited about what this brings. It reminded me of a concept that came out in the early 2000s after the .com bubble called the semantic web, right? And so the idea here, this was like before, jQuery and, all the kind of reactive, responsive websites and API access that we have now, right? None of that stuff existed. And the idea basically was that, any organization could, following the specific protocol, could open up access into their system, and then machines would be able to just like compose those things together and transliterate them, like, weather and stock prices and things like that. And then you wouldn't even necessarily need to write any software for this. You could just kind of stitch them together. Now we have products like that now, like, Zapier and If This Then That, and those sorts of things that enable those types of workflows. But I kind of see this as a, at least a partial realization of that original ideal and intent that just had never come to fruition because it was still too technologically complicated. It required too many humans building the connector pieces,
And for those humans to agree on, how this was going to happen. I mean, yeah, it's, I guess being able to loosely define this now allows us to not necessarily have to agree on a standard and yet still come out with relatively reliable, consistent results.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, the other thing that this reminds me of is decentralized finance, right? Which is this, you have this composability designed around individual pieces that where when people do creative and innovative things with them, then the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. You know what I mean? And I think that's really the magic of what's been created here. It's these things are not they're obviously not sentient, right? Like, people, I think that gets sensationalized in the news because it gets headlines, but the real value add, I think, that comes from these things is making it easier for people to connect software systems without having to have extremely deep technical know-how on like how to move specific types of data from one place to another, right? And so what does that mean for Frogland? It actually is, it's a massive boon, I think, because, with our focus on lore and everything, we've actually been preparing for this since the very beginning. The rap sheets we had everyone create initially, derivatives contests, hype lore, those sorts of things, all the conversations that we have in Discord, the role playing that happens in some of the different channels, and all those sorts of things, that just becomes food for this tool that we're building, where we can take all of that stuff, which is in a very unstructured format right now. We still have to provide structure to it, but we can lean on the language models to be able to do a lot of that heavy lifting, rather than having to write various heuristics ourselves, or have to do our own deep training, which is just like cost prohibitive for a company like ours, right? We can take the stuff that's already out there that exists and modify it, extend it, and use those tools to give a really compelling experience in this world. So
right.
So
it provides the rich context to help customize the way these bits of tech are augmenting the world and adding color. It makes them more full and informed.
Right. And so, like, what's really changed, this has been brewing for a while, right? I mean, these language models have been around for about a decade or so, and then it was right around, I think, 2017, where the Transformers paper came out, which kind of was the basis for ChatGPT and those other types of products that gave us this next iteration here. But what's always kind of plagued these things has been this problem of memory, right? So like these models are humongous. They're very large. And in order for them to have a specific context around a specific world, like say ours, like our Toadex, for example, you have to feed that into it, and it has to remember those things, And so like there's a trade-off between, performance, reliability, and speed and costs and all these other different variables and factors. And so there's a piece of technology that has been around for a while that's people have figured out is a really natural fit for this, and that's called a vector database, right? And so what a vector database does is it's a way of taking all of that unstructured data or loosely structured data and turning it into something that the language models can understand and then also remember their context. And so what we've been exploring over the past few weeks is using that technology to augment things like OpenAI's APIs and even some of the open source models that are out there, so that they can remember and that we can keep that context in our world where the personalities that are generated are stored in these vector databases, or they're stored maybe even on chain if we can figure out how to do that. But that gives us it opens up a whole world of possibilities where the characters can start to learn from from your interactions with them and behave differently with, say, asymmetrical access to information. Like, let's say, for example, that, we have an NPC and you've been interacting with that NPC, and there's some shared knowledge in that conversation between you. That NPC can almost secretively use that information when interacting with other people without actually saying exactly what it was that happened in that conversation, right? And so it creates some really interesting use cases, I think.
I mean, even just to start, I guess it's the difference between the most simple example here. If you've gone and used ChatGPT and tried to dump anything big in there, you may have gotten to the point where it's more tokens than it can take at once. And our Toadex, that we have collectively made together as the team and the community, certainly exceeds that. But it'd be great to have all that context or large swathes of that context for certain things. And now those vectors, being able to vectorize that, allows us to feed that in a bit at a time, get out a vector, which is you can think of as a compressed, summarized way of representing that knowledge, and we can can put those vectors together as we get these different vectors out and end up with a single vector that contains all that knowledge, so that we then are able to then give a small or large new piece of context just along with that vector, and then get an answer within all that context. And that can get, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but pretty arbitrarily large.
Oh, yeah.
That a vector can represent pretty much any amount of input. It's ready. The vector is based within the context of the trained model.
There's no limit other than our ability to develop the models, or the idioms and paradigms and semantics to interact with these things, right? So it's kind of the Rosetta Stone, I think maybe is probably a good example here of how to bridge the traditional world of computer programming with this new world of programming these language models, right? And there's a lot of things that we can do with that. To start with, we're trying to start simple, right? We want to get something put together that feels fun and unique, and is going to actually provide value for people, both from a story perspective and then also from their interactions with the project and the product. And so that's what we're working on right now, kind of in the side while we're getting all of these other things out and launched. But I'm very excited about what that can do. And it's really this stuff is so new. All these individual technologies have been around for quite a while, but it's only in the past 6 months or even like last 30 days where they've been stitched together in this way. So we are very actively trying to figure out like what are the useful patterns for working with these things, and how can we construct components that you guys can use in a natural way that feels fun and engaging, but then also helps improve the system over the long term. And characters are a very obvious place to start with that. And I think that to summarize here a little bit, like our technological approach to this, I think, is going to give us a very novel and unique experience. And then, of course, this rich world of lore that we've all been building for the past couple of years should make this feel very fun for everyone, I think.
So, I mean, so Matt, tell me if I'm jumping on this too quickly, but I guess I think call to action. We'd also really like to see from the community is some more of, I think, this discussion that you started, Froggy Digital, was it yesterday or recently on the Discord, of what pieces of media resonate with people that they know and love and that feel Frogland to them, and that that kind of abstract thinking would have been harder to use in the past, but actually is more useful and very informative when it comes to making use of that in the context of some of these AI tools. I mean, things like speaking about a character and saying, oh, this character is almost like a mixture between the X-Files, Marlboro Man, and sorry,
Smoking Man.
Yeah, sorry, Smoking Man.
I don't know that we ever learned what his preferred brand was.
Yeah, the Smoking Man and some other character, and although that sounds kind of vague if you were in a design meeting, typically previously, actually with these large language models, it has a lot of context for what that means. And so taking that, pairing it with a couple other things, and then actually providing that as context for a character within the Frogland lore context actually can produce some really interesting, meaningful, and unpredictable results. So I think that's something that is actually going to be an interesting, fun, and useful exercise, is to interact with the community in these terms that aren't super demanding and are touching on things that they love and are familiar with, and how they relate to Frogland and what they love about this project and each other and the rest of the community, and actually churn out something that's really usable by us with these tools that we're iterating on.
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to stories, right? And for stories, we need characters and we need interactions, and there's so much to draw on. We have our own influences. I shared some of my personal ones yesterday, but like we'd also like to see what other people are enjoying, how they see this world developing and evolving, because that's going to help us seed, to decide which of these things we need to seed this with first as a starting point to be able to pull together this very unique voice, right? And I think what the subtext here, at least for me, is that I think that there's a hope that between the way that we've been building, what we've been building, our own personal influences and biases in developing this project, the language models, and then the community interaction with all of that, that's going to make this thing feel very unique and powerful and a fun place that people want to be, right? And like, that's definitely the goal.
So Froggy Stardust in Discord is saying Morley is CSG preferred brand.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I mean, that was about all that I had today. I mean, obviously we can keep going, but I mean, as far as updates, like, we're moving things forward. we've still got a couple of other games that are in development, and there's going to be a lot coming out over the next couple of months. And then this AI thing is just like it's a huge deal. So it's it is having an influence on just about everything that we're doing in one way or another. But we're very excited about using this new programming paradigm to be able to build something that people can engage with.
Yeah, and I guess to touch on what Snoop opened up with earlier, we're also very excited about the stage we're in as a project, as a community, with taking this to the next level, and really getting some good feedback on the people from the people we're interacting with on scaling this up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you'll like what we have to share next town hall. So we'll leave it at that. And thank you all very much for joining us and for your continued patience and support while we build out this crazy world of Web3. So we wish you all a very good Ribbit, and we'll see you all next month.
Ribbit, 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 ribbit.
Ribbit, ribbit, everyone.